Tonight, a Northwest Reports exclusive.
Maybe I can tell you a little bit about the D.B. Cooper case.
The world's most famous airline hijacking.
D.B. Cooper left a clue on the airplane.
Maybe we can tell you who did it.
I liked Richard. I only met him once.
He had the ability to look you right in the eye and scare you half to death.
He had been to Vietnam twice.
The FBI never made a case against him in court.
They shot him and killed him.
But two former federal officials say a jury would have convicted him.
If you take a look at the two birds, they came out of the same nest.
He fit. He fit perfectly.
And tonight, Malcolm X.
We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us.
And filmmaker Spike Lee.
For all you enlightened human beings to feel I'm a racist and anti-Semitic because my black ass 2 times.
Why isn't Malcolm X opening in Portland's premier theater, which sits on the edge of the city's largest black neighborhood?
It could be looked at and interpreted as subtle forms of racism.
We obviously made a terrible mistake somewhere, but it wasn't in the things that have been implied.
Northwest reports on why Malcolm X the movie may not be coming to a theater near you. And tonight, Nuns, a vocation in decline.
Until I was in the 7th grade, I wanted to be a nun.
Changes in society have left many convents searching for new recruits.
Many parents are criticizing priests for the way they do things in the parish.
Florence Jonick looks into those who've stayed true to their vows and what will happen when there are none.
For me, the future is what God wants it to be.
And Jerry Frank takes us back in history with a trip through the Pendleton Underground. Tonight on Northwest Reports. Good evening and welcome to Northwest Reports. I'm Lars Larson. 1 week from tonight, the Northwest marks the 21st anniversary of the nation's only unsolved airline hijacking for money. The FBI calls it unsolved. But a couple of former lawmen from Utah say the agency had the right man locked up at one time, and if it hadn't made so many mistakes, the FBI might have solved the mystery of D.B. Cooper. Live in the Northwest for any length of time, and you will learn the name of D.B. Cooper. On Thanksgiving Eve, November 24th, 1971, the man using that name bought a ticket from Portland to Seattle on Northwest Airlines Flight 305 and showed the stewardess what looked like a bomb. On the ground in Seattle, he demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes. As the plane flew south again, he bailed out over La Center, just north of Portland. The FBI never found Cooper, never found his parachute, and only years later found a few remnants of the money on a Columbia River beach.
Just about everybody knows that he was the only successful hijacker that ever got away.
Jim Housley, former assistant U.S. attorney from Salt Lake City, Utah, thinks he met and prosecuted the man who once called himself Dan Cooper.
The standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. And the evidence that I've disclosed to you would, I think, would be used, and in my view, would have a fair chance of convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that it was McCoy who committed the Cooper hijacking. When the FBI finally caught up with him, he pulled a gun on the FBI agents that were trying to arrest him, and they shot him and killed him. That basically is a short form of the story of D.B. Cooper. Pardon me, that's the story of Richard McCoy.
That's right, Richard McCoy. And who is Richard McCoy?
And I can tell you from 20 plus years in the FBI that if, in fact, we could have made McCoy as D.B. Cooper, we would have done it. End of story.
The FBI special agent in charge in Portland, Robin Montgomery, has a simple answer for questions about D.B. Cooper and Richard McCoy.
At this point, he has been eliminated as a suspect.
He fit. He fit perfectly.
Although Housley never prosecuted McCoy for the Cooper case, he did indict and convict him for another airplane hijacking. Less than 6 months after D.B. Cooper bailed out with $200,000, Former U.S. Army Green Beret Richard McCoy hijacked United Airlines Flight 855 from Denver to Los Angeles. McCoy hijacked the plane, diverted it to San Francisco, demanded parachutes and $500,000, and then he bailed out over Utah. 2 days later, the FBI arrested McCoy at his home in Provo. A search of the house turned up the grenade, the gun, and $499,970 in cash.
He was a daredevil, very courageous. He just was a fellow that had no fear.
He had demolition training. He was a fixed-wing pilot. He flew helicopters. And he, unusual with most crimes, he had the ability to look you right in the eye and scare you half to death.
He had been to Vietnam twice. He was highly decorated.
Russ Callum and Bernie Rhodes wrote the book on McCoy, literally. D.B. Cooper, the real McCoy, spells out dozens of connections between the two cases. And these are no ordinary book authors. Rhodes headed the federal parole and probation system in Utah for 20 years. Callum worked as an FBI special agent for 25 years before retiring as head of the Salt Lake office. The FBI here in Salt Lake City came to know Richard McCoy very well, and they believed that their case looked amazingly similar to the Cooper hijacking less than 6 months before. McCoy possessed a pilot's understanding of terminology and procedures. He had paratroop training and demolition training from the Army, and he knew law enforcement procedures from going to school in that area and from his friends who worked in that community. The FBI agents in Salt Lake City worked hard on the theory that McCoy might be Cooper, but they weren't in charge of the Cooper case. Those agents were hundreds of miles away in Seattle, Washington, and they didn't believe that Richard McCoy was Dan Cooper.
They made some very blatant mistakes.
Bernie Rhodes points out that D.B. Cooper created a whole new kind of crime, skyjacking for the purpose of extortion. He says the FBI had never handled that kind of crime before. Years later, Rhodes talked to one of the FBI agents who worked the Cooper case.
He said, you know, we'd made a lot of mistakes and we were scolded by Washington, D.C.
What kind of mistakes? Well, Rhodes points out that the FBI never collected magazines and other articles from the plane that Cooper touched, evidence that might have provided the man's fingerprints. The plane landed in Reno, and Rhodes says the FBI let the tiny Reno crime lab process the evidence. The FBI in Salt Lake City had problems following up on the McCoy-Cooper connection. Callum, who was retiring when agents arrested McCoy in the United hijacking, says he briefed the man who took over the Salt Lake FBI office.
He didn't have any interest in it. It wasn't, I couldn't understand his lack of interest.
Yet there seems good reason to believe Cooper and McCoy were the same man. Start with the way they look.
And if you compare the picture that the witnesses to the D.B. Cooper case came up with this aid of a police artist, it looks exactly like Richard McCoy.
Former prosecutor Jim Housley.
Well, the modus operandi, the MO, had McCoy's signature all over it.
The man who hijacked Northwest Flight 305 called himself Dan Cooper. The news media apparently changed it to DB. He used notes typed ahead of time to tell the pilot where to fly the plane. Richard McCoy, a helicopter and fixed-wing pilot, did exactly the same thing on United Airlines Flight 855 6 months later.
And it would have vectors and directions and things like that on it that were things that that an ordinary person like myself or maybe like you wouldn't know about.
The hijackers used something a bit more unique than typing paper for their notes.
They used aviation flight plans, both of them. There wasn't any way Richard McCoy would have known about that because those had been protected. That kind of evidence in the D.B. Cooper case was protected by the FBI.
You see in both cases, Cooper and McCoy, that he used what well, how would you best describe it? I guess it would be pilot lingo and aft staircase, interphone.
The flight crews of both planes remember the hijacker kept using the phrase, "no funny stuff." Both hijackers specified where the refueling truck should be parked, probably to prevent the FBI from using it as cover during an assault on the plane. Rhodes and Callum say McCoy's hijacking showed improvements from the Cooper case. Each hijacker had a stewardess nearby to carry notes to the pilot.
In the Cooper case, he had her sit pretty much alongside of him. In the McCoy case, he had her sit in front of him. Much improvement there. Because she couldn't look and turn around and really study him and see him and look at his hand.
In the Cooper case, the FBI delivered the money in a bag with the zippers removed. Rhodes and Callum figure McCoy, under the name of Cooper, lost most of the money and therefore had to do a second hijacking.
He brought a duffel bag the second time, had a lot of things stored in it.
McCoy brought his own parachute and equipment to attach the money bag to his parachute harness. Another improvement, in the Cooper hijacking, the flight crew got a good look at the man through a peephole in the cockpit door.
He taped that over in the McCoy case real quick so that they couldn't use that peephole. He knew what he was doing. He really did.
Both hijacked planes were 727s, with staircases in the rear that could be lowered.
D.B. Cooper didn't know how to open that back door. D.B. Cooper had to have help, but Richard McCoy comes along about 5.5 months later. He didn't need any help from Diane Serdam. He sent her up front.
Witnesses described Cooper as dark-skinned and older, with yellow stains on his fingers.
We know in the McCoy case that he put a heavy, dark makeup on.
Former Utah FBI Chief Russ Callum figures McCoy got makeup on his first 2 fingers while putting on the makeup in the Cooper case, and the crew mistook it for nicotine stains from smoking.
They both sat in the same seat, and one of them, Cooper, left the string tie, which Tina Mucklow was the stewardess, gave to the FBI and told them that she'd seen D.B. Cooper take the tie off.
The Seattle FBI office confirms that it still has a thin black tie and a mother-of-pearl tie tack that D.B. Cooper left on the plane.
D.B. Cooper left a clue on the airplane. The clue that he left on the airplane was a tie tack, a very distinctive tie tack.
Former prosecutor Jim Housley figures that clue ties McCoy to Cooper.
In the investigation of the McCoy case, they found a Polaroid picture of McCoy wearing a tie with that tie tack.
McCoy's mother-in-law and his sister-in-law were both shown a photograph of the tie clasp and the necktie. And their reaction was that that's like McCoy's, or that is McCoy's.
Denise, in particular, according to Jim Tyson, said, well, that's Richard's. Where'd you fellas get it? And he said, well, we got it off of the D.B. Cooper plane, and she broke into tears.
The FBI says the tie does not link McCoy to Cooper.
There was nothing unique about it, as you will, and then there was a simulated pearl tie clasp.
Yet the FBI, to this day, refuses to let the public see the tie because agents say it might still be used to identify the skyjacker.
Cooper was described, if you recall, as being about 45 years of age, kind of having a swarthy complexion. I think while he was in the plane, he smoked, and he did have a drink.
The FBI's Robin Montgomery points out that as a Mormon, McCoy neither drank nor did he smoke. But Callum and Rhodes point out that McCoy used to do both before he converted. Would a man careful enough to wear makeup and a wig, as McCoy did in one hijacking, disguise himself in other ways?
I think he could have smoked him to throw you off.
There were a couple of inconsistencies.
The FBI insists McCoy could not have committed the Cooper hijack.
One, McCoy was back at his residence in Utah, I think that Thanksgiving day, which would have been the day after the hijacking.
The man who called himself D.B. Cooper hijacked that Northwest Airlines jet on Thanksgiving Eve. Now, Richard McCoy's family says that he spent the Thanksgiving holiday right here in Provo, Utah, that he helped cook dinner on Thanksgiving Day and stayed all evening. But authors Russ Callum and Bernie Rhodes say the documents they dug up show something entirely different. They show that Richard McCoy, a devout Mormon, a non-smoker, a non-drinker, and a non-gambler, wasn't here in Provo. He was 372 miles away in Las Vegas.
There was gasoline bought by a fellow driving a Volkswagen with a North Carolina plate assigned to McCoy, okay? And he signed a gas ticket on his credit card, and the FBI laboratory said he wrote the signature, Richard McCoy.
And where was that gas bought?
And that gas was bought at that thrust station, power thrust station, just west of the airport, McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas.
Half a mile from that gas station sits the Tropicana Hotel and Casino,
where he made a phone call from a commercial phone. Now, the other thing that puts him, there was a phone call made from the Tropicana Collect to McCoy's home at 11, was it 11:10 or 10:10, that evening, Thanksgiving evening.
What is a man that doesn't shoot dice, play blackjack, drink whiskey, chase women, smoke cigarettes, do in Las Vegas, Nevada on Thanksgiving?
Bernie Rhodes thinks he knows the answer to that question.
Probably when he got back from Portland, laundered the money there at the Tropicana or maybe a number of hotels, and then got on the phone and called home and he said, "It's over, I'm on my way." I think that's a logical thing to do.
The Federal Marshal Service assigned one man to guard Richard McCoy during his trial. John Seiler says McCoy talked openly about his own hijacking, the one he was on trial for, and he says McCoy claimed to know something about the Cooper hijacking, something that only Dan Cooper would have known at the time.
He said that in the Cooper case, when Cooper bailed out and his chute opened, the jolt jarred the money from his grasp, and he lost the money.
John Seiler assumed that McCoy had read something in the newspaper. Only years later, when some of the money turned up, did Seiler realize that McCoy knew something that only Cooper should have known.
Well, he lost all but I think around $10,000 or $12,000.
Rhodes points out that Cooper had to contend with a bank bag full of money from which the FBI had removed all zippers.
The woman, the stewardess, did see him take apart a chute, if you will, cut the shrouds, the nylon shrouds, and it looked like he was tying the money up in a package to make it tighter.
Callum says that when Cooper let some of the stewardesses go in Seattle, Cooper did a Robin Hood.
He offered them a pack. A pack of 100 is $2,000.
Offered one to each of the gals that were getting off of the plane, and he said, "Here, take those. It's Thanksgiving, and you've been nice to me," or something to that effect.
The crew turned down the offer, and Cooper stuffed the packs into his suit. Rhodes and Callum figured Cooper, or McCoy, lost the money, all of it except what he had pocketed. His close friends told Northwest Reports that McCoy, who was in school at the time on the GI Bill and whose wife did social work, was always short of money.
Then, after the Cooper jump in November of '71, he took his sister-in-law, his wife, and 2 children and flew them back to Carolina. He paid for that right off to the credit card company. Now we're talking about a sizable amount. He bought new tires for his car. He did a number of things that showed that money was a little easier.
A judge sentenced McCoy to 45 years in a federal prison. 2 years later, he escaped and began robbing banks. 4 months later, the FBI caught up with him. He fired one shot. 3 agents shot back, killing him.
I can only tell you that this case is still unsolved as far as the FBI is concerned.
Northwest Reports wanted to talk with McCoy's widow, but her attorneys say she has changed her name and now works for the federal government and doesn't want the publicity. In addition, the former Mrs. McCoy has sued the authors of the book we mentioned for alleged inaccuracies in the story it tells. Coming up next, Northwest Reports looks at Malcolm X and why the movie won't be playing in the flagship theater of Portland's biggest movie chain.
The white man brings it in. The white man brings it to Harlem. The white man makes you a drug addict.
Malcolm X the Man and the movie.
You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok.
It opens around the country tomorrow night, but not in Northeast Portland.
Do you believe that disturbances are always caused by African Americans?
No.
Well, neither do I. And I don't appreciate having anyone imply that I do.
Actually needs to be taught a lesson.
Up next, Northwest Reports looks at the controversy over Malcolm X. Later tonight on Northwest Reports,
Like I wake up maybe about 5:30.
few women decide to enter convents these days.
Why should I enter religious life when I can do that out in the world?
Florence Jonick looks into what will happen when there are none. Welcome back to Northwest Reports. Tomorrow night, a movie premieres in Portland and around the country. Northwest Reports doesn't ordinarily do movie reviews, but this piece of film is no ordinary movie. Malcolm X, Spike Lee's $34 million, 3-hour, 21-minute-long epic about the African-American activist, marks what some people see as a litmus test for the city's biggest theater chain. Some African-American leaders see the decision by Act 3 Theaters not to open Malcolm X in its biggest and most profitable theater, which sits on the edge of the city's largest black neighborhood, as a slap in the face and as racially discriminatory. We talked with the city's African-American leaders, and we talked with Act 3. Portland Act 3 President Walt Amon refused to talk to any other news media, but tonight, in an exclusive Northwest Reports interview, Amon tells his side of the story. Tonight, an explanation of why, for some people, tomorrow night's opening of Malcolm X will not be at a theater near you.
When you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men.
In life, Malcolm X inspired people. He challenged people, and he scared people.
We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us. But we are not nonviolent with anyone who is violent with us.
The American civil rights battlefield has often been found in ordinary places. Which school a child attends, where a person sits at a lunch counter, and which seat on the bus you're entitled to.
Before there was any such thing as a Republican or a Democrat, we were black. Before there was any such thing as a Mason or an Elk, we were black. Yeah, that's right. Before there was any such thing as a Jew or a Christian, we were black people. In fact, before there was any such place as America, we were black.
In Portland, 27 years after the death of Malcolm X, the question comes down to where you can see the movie his life inspired.
People began to notice a pattern that certain films aimed, one would assume, at an African-American audience were not showing at the Lloyd cinemas, the flagship theaters for Act 3.
Act 3 represents by far the largest movie chain in Portland. It commands 90% or more of movie ticket sales. Art Alexander, executive assistant to City Commissioner Mike Lindbergh, says he and other black leaders met with Act 3 officials a year ago to talk about where movies were shown.
Black films were being ghettoized at the Guild. This sense that anything that might attract a large black crowd was not placed in the flagship theater, the Lloyd Cinemas.
Every film distributor in the country wants their picture in the Lloyd.
Act 3's president in Portland, Walt Amon, knows the importance of his Lloyd Cinemas.
That theater was known by everyone the day it opened.
When all of the other major Hollywood films come out, they show them on, the best of them get shown here.
No movie, particularly written by Spike Lee, has made it to that theater, at least at Lloyd Cinema, but they were being shown at outlying areas.
Portland Urban League head Dr. Darryl Takufu charges that Act 3 has kept some movies out of the Lloyd.
Basically, they would be movies that had a black interest or a predominantly African-American cast.
It sends a message, particularly to African-American youth, that you are second-class citizens.
But it is my understanding that all of the Spike Lee pictures prior to this one have been art venue pictures.
Act 3's Walt Amon points out that Spike Lee isn't the only director with a much-talked-about picture that didn't open at the Lloyd. Take Robert Redford, for example.
Now, let me ask you a question. What do you think about the fact that River Runs Through It is not playing at the Lloyd?
But some people claim the theater chain shows a clear history of discrimination. Ted Salter, who once worked for a black music radio station in Portland, says he approached Act 3 when the studio that released Harlem Nights wanted a big promotion in Portland.
And they said, well, the premiere for this is going to be at Tigard. And this was, I said, wait a minute, Tigard on a Tuesday night, that's not this audience. I said, now, not to say that there's no black people in Tigard, but you can look at any survey and you know where the black people are in the city of Portland. There's a black community here of people. And they're right here, right next to the Lloyd Center. Well, we just can't get a theater. There's not one available there. Well, the problem is there's never one available there, ever.
On another occasion, Salter remembers attending the screening of a movie that Act 3 was considering for its theaters.
I came and watched, and I said, this movie will go over big in the black community. And they said to me, well, may cause some violence. Had any movie caused violence in Portland up to now? Well, no, but. And I said, what's the problem?
Somebody at Act 3 is paranoid about having large numbers of African Americans in the theater because there might be some problem. And then if there's a problem, then other people won't come to the Lloyd cinemas if they think that something bad is going to happen there.
And to us, again, that seemed to sound like subtle racism, or at least inference that people of color, more specifically African Americans and particularly youth, that because of the fact they were in a movie that had a predominantly African American cast, that all of a sudden something's going to happen, even though there seemed to be no history of that.
Do you believe that disturbances are always caused by African Americans?
No.
Well, neither do I. And I don't appreciate having anyone imply that I do.
The community perception is that because of what we've historically seen as a racist stereotype of African Americans as being more prone to violence, somehow more dangerous, that stereotype, that idea has worked its way into the booking policies of Act 3.
Act 3's Walt Amon says the concern wasn't crowds of African Americans, but simply crowds of people.
But the kind of problems that occur when people want to get in a fight in a line because they were kept out in the rain for an hour and then didn't get a seat. I don't know of any color or race or religion or anything else that enters into that equation. It just takes a hothead.
I think more problems develop when you have people line up to go see something and then all of a sudden they're told, well, it's full.
It is a major event. And we tried to recognize it as a major event at a major event theater.
Act 3 figured the movie might generate huge crowds the first week, so it told Warner Brothers it wanted to run the movie in the enormous but aging Fox Theater in downtown Portland.
Now, am I to understand that we are giving less attention to a movie when we open it where we can give it 1,500 seats to open?
They didn't do that for Batman, they didn't do that for JFK, they didn't do that for any other film.
Art Alexander sees the special treatment that Act 3 proposed as discriminatory.
It sends a message, particularly to African American youth, that you are second-class citizens, because this pattern is not lost on them. I mean, kids aren't stupid. I mean, they know they go see Home Alone in the theater near their neighborhood, but a film that has to do with their concerns and their issues gets sent downtown where they have to leave. They have to go someplace else, to a smaller, older theater.
You got what you wanted. No, I'm not satisfied.
Warner Brothers didn't like Act 3's plan to open its $34 million Spike Lee movie downtown.
So when they came back to you and said no?
They didn't come back and say no. They came back and said they had licensed the picture to Cinema 21.
Amon claims that if Warner had agreed to let the movie open downtown and then move to the Lloyd after 1 week, he would have talked it over with Tukufu, Alexander, and other black leaders.
And if there had been a large resistance to that and no appreciation of what we thought were legitimate concerns, it would have gone to the Lloyd. But we never got that opportunity. We were just told that the picture had gone to Cinema 21.
Act 3 ran a full-page newspaper ad this weekend to explain its position.
We obviously made a terrible mistake somewhere, but it wasn't in the things that have been implied.
At least one group, the Coalition of Black Men, has called for a boycott of all Act 3 movies to hurt Act 3 economically. Some economic damage has already taken place because Act 3, the movie giant, lost the downtown opening week rights to the movie Malcolm X to the tiny second-run theater, Cinema 21.
I find it hard to believe anyone would pass up a film like that.
Cinema 21 owner Tom Rainieri had a chance to screen Malcolm X before just about anyone else in the Northwest.
I think the whole controversy about where it's going to play in Portland is valid. There's some valid points being made about it. But I think what might get lost in the whole thing is that regardless of where it plays, is a film that people should see.
Malcolm X opens around the country and in Portland, Oregon tomorrow night. Coming up next, Florence Jonick on the subject of nuns. Later tonight on Northwest Reports, Jerry Frank takes us back in history with a trip through the Pendleton Underground. Welcome back to Northwest Reports. Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas, film and television star Patty Duke, and baseball legend Babe Ruth all have something in common. All were educated by nuns. Today, Catholic schools still exist, but lay people do most of the teaching. There simply aren't enough nuns to go around, and those that are left often choose to do other work. Tonight, Florence Jonick, a product of parochial schools, takes a look at what will happen when there are none.
A sunny Sunday afternoon in Beaverton finds 7 women celebrating a combined total of 340 years of service to God with the Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon. The group's senior member, Sister Mary Mildred Wolfe, joined the order 70 years ago at the age of 16.
That they may devote themselves more fervently to the service of your
Anniversary masses like this one come along a lot more often these days than celebrations welcoming new members. The order numbers only 120 sisters, down from 250 30 years ago. Their average age is 65, and there is only one new member.
And it is disheartening sometimes to people in religious community not to have a number of people entering every single year. But we have to face the fact that we as a religious community, we as the church, and we as a society are going through some tremendous changes, and we have to adjust.
Sister Charlene Herrings warns that unless recruitment picks up considerably, the order faces a decline to 50 or 60 members in 20 years. 25-year-old Danielle Morrison, the order's lone new member, says the prospect doesn't worry her.
No, it doesn't, because more people will come. It seems like a relatively young community. You know, I mean, although the numbers may not say that, I guess it isn't a major concern of mine.
But has Morrison committed herself to an institution that threatens to vanish in her lifetime? Some fear that's the fate of the sisterhood, traditionally referred to as the Long Black Line. Nationwide, the church counts fewer than 100,000 nuns, a decrease of 43% since 1962. The Portland area has seen a 50% drop in the same time span.
pray to the Lord.
Years ago, nearly every parish had a convent attached to it. Today, many have been mothballed or are used as office space. The nun drain started in the late 1960s after the Second Vatican Council, commonly called Vatican II. That was a big meeting of cardinals called in 1962 by Pope John XXIII to update the Roman Catholic Church. And update it did, much to the chagrin of many Catholics. Gone was the Latin Mass, as well as the rule forbidding Catholics from eating meat on Fridays. Convents did away with rules dating back to the Middle Ages, and many dispensed with the habit as well.
This is the day we became nuns. We wore the crown of flowers.
Brides of Christ. Maurice Class joined thousands of other nuns who left in the turmoil and questioning that followed Vatican II. Class entered the order at age 15. She called herself a Benedictine for 20 years.
It was during the time we were beginning to change and we were more free and open and we could invite people to our house. We hadn't had that experience. And then I met this woman who I had an attraction for.
Class now works as a massage therapist in Portland. She rejects Christianity. She also harbors a lot of bitterness against the church.
I was part of that community, but how did I leave? I wrote a letter to Rome, to a bunch of men I don't even know, who, after a long period of time, wrote me a letter that had to be translated from Latin into formal words about that I was no longer a nun. I mean, it was very, I object to that.
Do this in memory.
Most of the nun exodus has ended. The church now faces the challenge of attracting new ones.
At the judgment, the citizens...
The Sisters of Mercy, for example, have had only one new nun west of the Mississippi in 9 years. Sister Canisius Daniels, coordinator of the Sisters of Mercy in Portland, attributes the decline to a decay in moral and spiritual values.
I think home life is not teaching them that this is a type of life that is special.
That's one that was taken right after I was professed.
When Sister Canisius entered the convent in 1941, priests and nuns commanded almost universal respect and admiration. She noticed a change in attitude when baby boomers started raising families.
I think the respect for religious life isn't there. I think that many parents are criticizing priests for the way they do things in the parish. And it may be that the priest isn't doing it the right way. But I think there is a way of expressing that before children that could still show respect for the priest.
Bishop Paul Waldschmidt holds his own theory for the drop in religious vocations.
Well, I think because there are more options for young women to serve the church.
Thus will I bless you while I live. Lifting up my hands, I will call upon your name.
Today, lay people perform a host of jobs in the church that were unheard of 25 years ago.
The body of Christ.
Celeste Granato, for example, holds the title Pastoral Minister at St. Michael's Church in downtown Portland. In addition to assisting at Mass, she counsels the sick, prepares people for the sacraments, and teaches religious education. Many of the duties nuns used to perform.
After Vatican II came about the need and the recognition that the people should once again be involved within their church in an active role, both male and female.
Another reason for the decline may be that religious life is in such a state of transition. It used to be that when you joined a convent, you knew exactly what you were getting into. Mother Superior ruled the roost, and what she said went. Daily life was extremely regimented. Mail and reading materials were censored. You couldn't eat in public, and you rarely, if ever, discussed your life before entering. Today, many nuns live in apartments and compete with lay people for jobs in the secular world. Their conscience, not Mother Superior, tells them if they are being faithful to their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
There's a freedom where we have to make decisions for ourselves instead of depending on a superior to make a decision for us. I think in the early days, if you wanted something, you asked for it, and you felt if you asked, regardless of how legal it was, if the superior said yes, why, you could do it.
Sister Canisius sees the move away from the habit as another positive development. She says the costume put people off.
See, and this would slip back.
Were these terribly uncomfortable?
You know, I didn't think it was when I wore it. When I put it on last year, I felt closed in. I mean, I was so happy to get it off. I said, boy, am I glad we don't wear these.
But others believe the church made a mistake in eliminating the habit. The Franciscan missionary sisters still wear them and say they've been an important factor in their ability to recruit young women like Sister Regina Markert.
One thing I felt called to it.
Sister Regina, a native of Iowa, saw an ad for the small Beaverton-based congregation in a newspaper. She liked the fact that the nuns in the pictures were wearing habits.
As a sign to other people, but mainly to myself, of what I am, that I am a consecrated virgin, and a reminder that I am separated, and to remember from myself and everyone else that I do belong to God.
The Franciscan missionary sisters are holding their own in recruiting at a time when other orders are seeing huge drops in membership.
Another one.
They have 56 sisters, down from a high of 70, a small drop compared to those suffered by other orders. Superiors credit their success to tradition.
It kind of goes with other things. I think, like, we live a community life. We live in the same house. We don't have any sisters living alone anywhere. Not one sister in one place. There are 2 sisters in New Mexico, but they live in a convent too. They don't live in an apartment. And none of our sisters have a personal car or have their own individual property like that.
I've often heard the comment that a girl is looking into religious life and she sees that the sisters can do whatever they want to do, have more freedom, and their comment is, well, why should I enter religious life when I can do that out in the world?
Even nuns who believe in the changes of the past 30 years will tell you they have been hard. Sister Charlene Herrings joined in 1966, a time when many others were bailing out.
I kept thinking, well, as soon as we get this finished, then everything will be settled. We'll be back to black and white answers and that kind of thing.
She says she found peace only after accepting the reality that her entire religious life would be one of change.
I think things often happen so that we stop taking things for granted.
Sister Charlene says there have been other clergy shortages throughout church history. She hopes this one gets over quickly.
Statistics will show you that the time after World War II, there was a definite increase in the number of religious in communities. And so we're coming off of that high, for one thing.
Some orders have begun associate programs that enlist lay people in carrying out their mission. Sharon Wyman, a divorced mother of 2, signed on as an associate of the Sisters of Mercy. She promised to live the gospel and work with the elderly and physically impaired for 1 year.
Until I was in the 7th grade, I wanted to be a nun. And after that, I learned about boys and thought, nope, forget the nuns. So, no, just as an associate, I feel that I'm able to do my part that way without going all the way.
To our surprise, many of the sisters interviewed for this report said they were unconcerned by their reduced numbers. There's a belief that God's in charge of this show, and when He wants more players, they'll be pounding at the convent doors to get in.
I see it being a strong part of the Catholic Church, and I see it growing more, maybe not in the massive numbers that it had before, but I do believe that following the teachings of the Holy Father, those communities will flourish.
Religious life is a part of the church, and it's always going to be that. People are going to be called to give a little bit more of themselves, to want to live under the life of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and there'll always be people who want to do that.
For me, the future is what God wants it to be.
No time this week for letters because of the length of the D.B. Cooper and Malcolm X stories tonight. We'll catch up with those letters next week. If you'd like to drop us a line, write to Northwest Reports, Post Office Box 3401, Portland, Oregon 97208. Jerry Frank's Northwest takes us underground this week to a place where you can see Oregon's Wild West past.
Get out your red flashlight in your history books, because tonight we go underground for a unique look at Oregon's past. A trip back to the time when the eastern Oregon town of Pendleton boasted 18 bordellos and 32 bars. A major flood destroyed much of the city in December of 1882, but that only temporarily dampened the spirits of the inhabitants. They simply built their town above and below the horizon. Cowboys and gold miners made the famous Shamrock Card Room their headquarters back in the 1880s. And tonight, we visit the place where these rough and ready characters did a lot of their gambling and drinking, and where many a bartender made an extra week's wages just by wiping up some spilled gold dust. In the 1870s, hundreds of Chinese immigrants came to this community from Shanghai. They worked the area's railroads, but they were not allowed into the social fabric of the town. And because of that, the 3,000-member Chinese community built a network of underground tunnels where they could live. This rock and timber maze eventually ran from the Umatilla River all the way to the train depot. And during Prohibition days, the tunnels became a hiding place for saloons, for stills, for card rooms, as well as for storage for the existing businesses. The Cozy Room Bordello on Main Street leads to the area where the most famous of the local madams, Stella Darby, she operated there until she was chased out of town. And in the early 1950s, the pressure from a local preacher led the city council to outlaw all the brothels. One madam had a secret exit built so that she could make her escape when the law arrived.
And this was Madam Stella's escape.
And in those days, you could live it up for just about $5. And today, you pay exactly the same fee to relive life in what was truly the heart of our country's Wild West.
The 10 o'clock news follows Northwest Reports. Here's a look at the stories it covers tonight. Welcome back to Northwest Reports. In the weeks ahead, we introduce you to a little boy held down by a crippling disease who's become an award-winning filmmaker. Coming up next week on Northwest Reports, a lot of people get lost every year in the great Northwest.
You consider this to be a Vibram-type soul.
Do Northwest counties have a good search and rescue system?
Some do, some don't.
You're not really getting what you think you're getting.
Northwest Reports examines questions of lost and found.
They won't come out and tell you it's the money.
Rural Oregon towns with a dim economic future.
Nobody wants to relocate a business in a town that looks dingy or looks like it's dying.
Jim Hyde reports on a nonprofit group that helps breathe life back into small Northwest towns.
The soul of the economy is really the people that drive that whole process.
Those stories and Jerry Frank's Northwest coming up next week on Northwest Reports.
To purchase a tape of tonight's Northwest Reports or any past Northwest Reports program, send a check for $10 to Northwest Reports, Post Office Box 3401, Portland, Oregon 97208. A transcript of a single story may be purchased for $3.